I think the question got to be asked, is the information a hindrance to the work? Is it possible that you've turned black culture into another religion? Is it possible that the same religious black folk you criticize are no different than you? We got some questions to ask. This is 150 years since the end of slavery. We got some questions to ask. 8 generations after slavery, where is your wealth? I didn't ask you for your books or your documentaries or your lectures. I said, where are the institute? Where's the infrastructure in the black community? I didn't ask you for incense and shea butter. I asked for infrastructure. His Excellency, the Provisional President of Africa, Marcus Messiah Garvey, said that if the black man and woman are not careful, you will drink in all the poison of Western civilization and die from its effects. Garvey said the black man needs to understand you can't beg for your place. You can't even demand your place. Garvey said, make your place. But when he came back from England, hanging out with Deuce Muhammad Ali, one of the forerunners of the Moorish Science Temples, who he ultimately had to throw out of the Garvey movement because he was teaching sovereignty instead of global African liberation. So Garvey said, I respect you, my brother, and I respect your Moorish philosophy, but that's not my program. My program is power, not law. So he gets back to Jamaica. On the way back, he reads a book written by a man who some of you consider to be a sellout. Booker T. Washington's Up from Slavery. It was Booker T. Washington, who many of you would consider an accommodationist Negro, who motivated Garvey to build the largest black movement of all time. Look at that. See, you need to understand something. 19th century black leaders and activists cannot be categorized as easily as you and I because they didn't have the formal ideological structure that you and I have. So Booker T will look integrationist in some lectures, and he'll look Pan-African in others. For those of you who think Booker T. Washington was a sellout, can you explain to me why this man out of his own pocket, not Tuskegee's account, but his personal account, paid and financed civil rights struggles undercover? If he was a sellout, why did he start the National Negro Business League, traveling around the country helping black folk sustain economic capital? If Booker T was a sellout, why was Tuskegee Institute one of the top hiding places for fugitive revolutionaries? If he was a sellout, why did he bring Africans from Africa to Tuskegee Institute and teach them enterprise and economics and finance them to go back to Africa to build independent states? This is in the 1800s. Booker T wasn't no sellout, but he told the white man what the white man wanted to hear as a strategy. And because you don't understand military science, because you don't understand that a leader can't always say what he means, you judge them a sellout. Just like you judged Dr. King a sellout because you didn't know that the Southern Christian Leadership Conference had a stockade of weapons. Because they expected nonviolence to break down. That Dr. King, when he took over the movement, did not agree with nonviolence. Bayard Rustin and the rest had to force him into not talking about arming black folks. Jumping to conclusions about leaders too fast. So Garvey gets back to Jamaica, and with the support of his girlfriend, Amy Ashwood Garvey, they launched the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. Some people say, Dr. Umar, I got a question about this. Why did Mr. Garvey put the word Negro in the title? Why didn't he say Universal African Improvement Association? The same reason why the new Black Panther Party got to call it the new Black Panther Party, because if they called it the new African Panther Party, you wouldn't think they was talking to you. He had to meet people where they were. In the early 1900s, Negro was the word of choice that our people identified with. Today, it is black. We've made no progress. We just changed a Spanish adjective for an English one. That's why you got black folk who say, I'm black, I'm not African. Ain't nothing changed. But before you start criticizing it, I don't agree with Negro either, but I understood why he did it. But before you start criticizing those who call themselves Negro, keep in mind that although they might have used the wrong noun, it was with that word that you got a Haitian revolution. Under your Africanity, you ain't had a revolution yet. Under that word, they invented the gas mask. Not you. It was under that word that Lewis Latimer did his research. They gave us the science on how to light up a street at night. Under that word, slavery was eliminated. My point is, the word ain't gonna free you. And some of you hoteppers think that if we change our names, maybe we can end oppression. You think that if we just find out what the right thing to call ourselves, white supremacy would disappear. So we waste our time in endless meetings debating over what name is most right. Are we Africans? Are we Hebrews? Are we Moors? Are we indigenous? Are we aliens? Some of you spaced out ass black folks. My point is, you don't suffer what you suffer because of what you call yourself. You suffer what you suffer for what you don't do for yourself. So Mr. Garvey starts the UNIA in Jamaica, goes to Kingston, but it does not work. Why does the UNIA not work in his hometown? Why does it not work in Jamaica? The same reason why it probably wouldn't work in Jamaica today. The Caribbean racial hierarchy is more complicated than it is here in America. In America, you are black or white. You might be biracial, but you're still black. You might be light-skinned with green eyes, but in America, one drop makes you African. It's a little more complicated in the Caribbean. It ain't just black and white. They have a hierarchy of colorism. It is octoroon. It is quadroon. It is mulatto. In the Caribbean, being a half shade lighter can make the difference between whether you pick up trash for a living or run for elected office. Marcus Garvey, being a blue, black, purple, nappy-headed, broad-nosed African, could not succeed with a program of racial equality in an island ruled by colorism. So it did not work. Who the hell is this black man to tell me I'm no better than the other Africans on this island when I have an Irish grandmom and a Portuguese great-grandfather? That's how it is in Jamaica, Cuba. That's how it is in the Caribbean. Do you know why? Because the enslaved Africans, our ancestors, when they were brought west, they were brought to the Caribbean to be broken. Because the Caribbean was the first stop in the transatlantic slave trade, they had to create division to ensure rebellion could not take place. That's why they put them in 8 different color shades to make sure they would never unite and fight. And you Negroes still stuck on color worship today. So he comes to America to meet with Booker T. Not to stay, but to get some advice, because Garvey said, I want to open up a Tuskegee Institute back home. But when he shows up, Booker T has passed on. But he meets with the second in command, new principal, R.R. Moulton. Him and Mr. Garvey do not hit it off. We find out later that R.R. Moulton, Booker T's vice president turned president after his death, was a paid Army agent who was sent to Tuskegee to investigate Booker T to see whether or not it was true that he was using Tuskegee as a hideout for revolutionaries. We talk in the late 1800s, early 1900s. You had agents back then. Imagine what you got now. So Garvey says Booker T's gone. He didn't like R.R. Moulton. He probably could sense that he was a sellout. So Mr. Garvey starts a 38-state tour to raise money for Jamaican Tuskegee. Whirlwind, 38 states. Who's this little short, pudgy man from Jamaica? He comes to New York City. And the Pan-Africanists in New York. And I want to say something. I got to say this. Because a lot of my elders in the Garvey movement, the UNIA, a lot of them don't know Pan-African history. Some of them think Marcus Garvey was the first to teach it. So I need to clarify out of respect for the predecessors of Garvey that nothing Marcus Garvey taught was new. They hate when I say that, but it's the truth. And I got to do justice to history. He taught nothing new. He said God was black. That did not come from him. That came from a Pan-Africanist before him by the name of Bishop Henry McNeill Turner. One of the first blacks elected during Reconstruction, the first black chaplain in the United States Army, one of the first bishops of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. He was the man who called the United States flag, a stinking dirty rag. He said God was black. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad didn't get that from him. He got it from Garvey, and he got it from Bishop Turner, because Elijah Muhammad, when he was Elijah Poole, attended Bishop Turner's elementary school in Georgia. So he was already told about God being black by a Pan-Africanist. Nothing's new under the sun. Elijah and Garvey both got it from Bishop Turner. Marcus Garvey's most famous quote, Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. The second part was his, but the first part comes from another Pan-Africanist by the name of Martin Robinson Delaney, one of the first black Masons in this country, one of the first black publishers in this country, one of the first black inventors in this country, and the first black uniform officer in the Civil War. That was his. Marcus Garvey put ships on the water, but he wasn't the first. Delaney had ships. Chief Alfred Sam had ships. Well, if that's the case, Dr. Umar, then you call yourself a Garveyite. What's so great about being a Garveyite? Garvey's greatness is not that he invented Pan-Africanism. Garvey's greatness is he's the first to give the ideology a mass movement. Before him, there was no universal movement for Pan-Africanism. Marcus Garvey did for Pan-African nationalism what Michael Jordan did for basketball. He did not invent it, he reinvented it.